As usual, as we like to do, we like to give a formal introduction to our friend, to our visitor, Julio Padovan, who is here with us tonight, talking about Pride and Guilt, Deadly Adversaries. And Julio was born in Brazil and has been studying Spiritism since the age of 15. He holds a PhD degree in biochemistry and molecular biology from the School of Medicine of São Paulo, University of São Paulo, Brazil. He moved to the U.S. at the invitation of Professor Brian Chait to work at the laboratory for mass spectrometry, and gaseous ion chemistry at the Rockefeller University in New York, where he currently holds the positions of Senior Research Associate and Associate Director. Julio is responsible for translations of Spiritist books from Brazilian Portuguese and French into English. He is a member of the Spiritist Group of New York, SGNY, where he is responsible for the Sunday Study Group. He is also a chemistry professor at the City University of New York and a lecturer for Spiritism and the General Science. Quite a lot. But we would like to add something I believe as important as this. He's also a good friend who is disseminating the beauty of Spiritism in all different areas, the philosophical, the scientific, and the religious as well, as he's going to be doing with us here tonight. And before I pass the word to Julio, what we would like to say is that we will have, this is going to be a little bit longer than we usually have, because it's actually two talks or two beautiful instructions combined into one. So please don't be alarmed. We're going to have a break. We have some refreshments in the back as well. We'll leave it up to Julio, where he's going to go ahead and talk for the whole 2 hours, and then you eat. No, I'm just joking. We'll have a break in between. So everybody can stretch, get some water, get some refreshments as well, and then we'll continue in the second part of it. At the end, we'll open for some questions, and if we do not get to you to answer all the questions, he'll be here also, obviously, to answer some of the questions that will not be answered, but we'll try to make this a good time for all of us. Make sure you take a lot of notes. Put your cell phones in mute, because I know a lot of us like to take notes as well on our cell phones, because there will be a lot of instruction. He said to me that after this talk tonight, you guys will be volunteering so free of all the good stuff. So, all right, that was a joke again. He didn't say that. I'm the one creating all that, so no, I don't want to put you in the spot. Julio, please. Thank you.
We are good to go here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you kindly for the words, for the invitation, the opportunity actually to be here. And I sincerely, humbly beseech the assistance of the spiritual benefactors for all of us here. These two topics, pride and guilt, are extraordinarily important to all of us. We are far from having mastered them, from having even understood them properly. And this is why I say to you that we need all the help that we can get, that we need to have all the assistance that the greater spirituality can provide to us, so we can move forward, move on, and one day reach the plenitude that we see, that we read so much about in Joanna de Angelis' books, in Emmanuel's books, and so on. So as you noticed, I changed the title slightly, The Enemies Within, or Deadly Adversaries. I like to do that, just to provoke people, and just to so that right at the beginning, you get a little bit of you get shaken a little bit, so that you realize, am I in the right room? Am I at the right lecture? You are. Don't worry about it, okay? So what we are going to discuss here is we are going to talk about pride and guilt. I'm going to start with pride, and you'll see now in a little bit why I start with pride, and later we are going to talk about guilt. All right? So this is what we're going to try to cover, what pride is, and if it is a part of the creation. And if so, if it is a part of the creation, could we see pride as a flaw in the creation plan? Is it necessarily evil? And if it is, or even if it's not, how powerful, how much evil is it? We want to know where it comes from, because no one can actually address an issue if they don't understand where the issue comes from. If you do not understand what you're dealing with, if you don't go to the causes of it, you're only addressing the consequences. The causes are always there, are always going to come back and fester, right? We also want to know what makes pride, what drives it, because once we know the causes and we know what fuels it, perhaps we'll have a better chance of addressing these issues, right? Should we eliminate pride completely from our lives? So this question is actually tied together with this one, whether it's evil, necessarily evil or not. And then what's the impact in our moral and also in our intellectual growth? But as I mentioned to you, we are also going to address guilt on the second part of our lecture after the break. And you're going to see that the questions are roughly the same, right? So I just want to show you. So the reason is that the whole point of these lectures, that these are the first two lectures of a series of lectures I've been working on. And the whole point is first to address causes, then to address things that can actually contribute to make these, to perpetuate these causes. Because once we know the cause, as I mentioned before, we can address the issues, all right, related to them. So let us start with the very first one. Actually, this is the official title of the separate talks. It's the psychology of series, the psychology of pride, the psychology of guilt, the psychology of this and that. So this is the very first one. And this is how we're going to start. All I ever wanted was to sing to God. He gave me that longing and then made me mute. Why? If God did not want me to praise Him with music, why implant the desire? Like a lust in my body and then deny me the talent? You shouldn't be alarmed. These are not my words. These are the words of Antonio Salieri in the movie Amadeus, right? And these are the words, as I said, of Antonio Salieri, who was portrayed, is a fictional character, portrayed by Farid Murray Abraham. And he won an Oscar for his interpretation. I am far from that Oscar. Do not worry about that. I am not concerned with the movie. I am not concerned whether this is a fictional story or a real one. What I am concerned here with is the words that Antonio Salieri, his waning years, at the end of his life, when he is actually confessing, he is sitting on his wheelchair at the asylum because he tried to end his life by cutting his throat. All right? So he was rescued, and then he is there on this day, and he's actually speaking to a priest. And the priest is, well, not as, at least you were half scandalized. But the priest is even more scandalized than all of you looked when I changed my tone of voice. Because he's accusing God of all his failures in life. So this is what I want to look at. And these are his words. All I ever wanted was to sing to God. He gave me that longing and then made me mute. Because Antonio Salieri, in his mind, in his perception of the universe in the movie, was always second-rate musician when compared to Mozart. Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. So he always felt like he was the second in command, or not the favorite, not the top-notch musician of the court. And he was so upset that in the movie, he tries to poison Mozart. And actually, before he poisons him, he tries to force Mozart to, he pays Mozart actually, to write a composition, a requiem mass, that he was then going to appropriate, right, take as his own, and play at Mozart's funeral. But Mozart actually dies before he can complete it, right? So you know the Lacrimosa, for instance, if you're familiar with classical music, that's part of it. So here are his words, and we are going to look carefully at them. All I ever wanted was to sing to God, self-pity, hopelessness. He's given up. He's at the end of his life, and according to his beliefs, all right, he has no other thing, he has no more time to do anything about it. And he's also depressed, despondence. If you put these three together, and because he is now saying that he wanted that, he's victimizing himself. Now, do not be alarmed by the fact that these words are in different places. You will understand in a minute why they are so. Let's keep going. He gave me that longing. God gave Salieri that longing, that need to express himself through music. He's frustrated, right? And then made me mute. He feels betrayed by the divinity, betrayed by God himself. Now, you come to me, you put me together, you create me, you give me this longing to express myself through music, but then you don't give me the talent. Well, it's like making me a bird without wings. How will I be able to fly? So he is disappointed. He feels that there was a deception in this whole process. He is betrayed. It's a feeling of betrayal. And in doing so, in perceiving the situation as such, he is transferring the problem to an external source, God. It's what we call assigning blame in layman's terms. He's assigning blame. It's God's fault. I came. I wanted, I had the longing, the desire to express myself to music, even to use my music to praise God. Well, if I couldn't do it, it's not my fault. It's God's fault. Let's continue. Why? Simple. He's irritated. He is escalating. Right? So he's trying to rationalize it. And of course, he can't find a rationalization. And this is why we come to the Spiritist Center. Because the more we know, the easier, or let's say, the less difficult it becomes for all of us to understand things. In this attempt at rationalization, attempt at understanding why he is a bird without wings, therefore he cannot fly, right? In his attempt to rationalize his situation, he doesn't have enough elements to do so properly. So he feels irritated, frustrated, because he can't go anywhere. Tell me something. Oh, we all do that. You are engaging sympathy. You are being empathic or attempting at to. It's called enlisting in psychology. You want to enlist sympathy, at least sympathy. If you don't get support, if you don't get help or assistance, it's not a problem. As long as you have the other person say something like, "Poor so-and-so, poor Salieri, you have so much dedication, and yet nobody gave you the talent to express that dedication." Or the famous pat on the back. It's the enlisting. Then he gets really nasty now. If God did not want me to praise him with music, why implant the desire? Now he's he's expressing anger. He's angry, all right? This is an accusation. This is a blunt accusation. And he ends up by saying, and then you deny me the talent. So you blame and you accuse the divinity. When we put all of this together, the first thing that we think of is envy. He's envious of Mozart. It has nothing to do with envy, which is something for another lecture. And the reason why I put all these items together is because I have divided them into personal, the ones we feel ourselves. Then there's the ones that we project. So we project deception, betrayal, blame, because we're moving the focus of attention towards something or someone else. All right? And then we have the mechanism. How do we project these? Transference. How do we project the blame? Accusation, and so on. That's just to make it a little more dramatic. But the point is, we can all relate to these things. How many times haven't we told a friend, a family member, a colleague at work about something sad that happened to us, and we presented ourselves as absolute victims in all of it? It may be true. There may be instances where we are victims, but we need to understand very carefully how this whole thing is put together so we may avoid situations like this one, where Salieri never really realized, in the movie again, all right? Salieri never really realized how important he was. That even though he might not have had the genius that Mozart had, he was a first-rate composer. But throughout his life, he made it a miserable journey because of his pride. But you're going to say, isn't that envy? Not necessarily. It's really pride. And let us understand a little bit now, because the first question then we have to address is then what pride is, correct? If I am saying this is pride, then I have to understand what pride is. Pride is our inability to evaluate a set of circumstances or a situation in a proper manner, in a correct manner. So we either under-evaluate something or we over-evaluate something. But we don't give it the correct value, right? Ooh, this is very dry, correct? Very abstract. Well, give me a few minutes. There's going to be a few more examples about it, about pride, and we'll discuss it. But what is important for us to understand is that it's our inability or a lack of experience to evaluate a situation or a set of circumstances or even a person correctly. Do not be embarrassed to say, to evaluate someone, to judge someone, to evaluate something, to judge something. Do not split hairs, because God does not look at your lexicon. God looks at what goes in your hearts and in your minds. So you can say, oh, I judged this person or I evaluated this person. But it's how we go about that judgment, that evaluation, that counts. We have a tendency to say, no, don't say judge, don't say judgment. Say evaluate, evaluation. It's the same thing. Look it up. The dictionary will tell you that there's very little difference between them, right? There are uses. For instance, you don't go and say, oh, today at the university I have a judgment. No, you say I have an evaluation, a test. But in the end, it's the same thing. You are going to be judged. You're going to see how your progress is going to be judged by someone who supposedly has more experience than you do, right? So in our attempt to evaluate our surroundings, the set of circumstances that we encounter in life, we normally misjudge them, we misevaluate them, we under-evaluate, and so on. And this is what we are going to consider pride. This brings us to the next item. So now we are not capable of evaluating it properly, correct? So we might say, well, but if I am the product of creation, so perhaps that's a flaw in my design, in my creation plan. When the Creator put me together, well, something went awry there. Something was missed, something was left out, or perhaps I was put in the oven, I was overbaked or was underbaked. Something happened. But it might be a design flaw. It is very hard for us to think of God creating something flawed if we say that God is perfect in everything. God is perfect in everything, in every degree, in every possible facet, in every possible circumstance. Anything you can think of in terms of a quality, God has it, and has it towards to perfection, not towards, to perfection. There is no such a thing as absolute perfection. Perfection itself is absolute. God has. So if God is perfect, then it cannot be a design flaw. Because if it is a design flaw, then God is flawed. And if God is flawed, well, then we have to throw all the books away and start writing things differently. Right? So we may see this then as something that we have to achieve. Remember what I said when I defined pride? I said it was our inability. So it is something then that we have to acquire, develop. Like we develop the ability to play an instrument, a musical instrument. Like we develop the ability to write code for, programming code for a computer. That we, as we develop our professional abilities, there are abilities. So this ability to perceive our surroundings and judge, evaluate these circumstances, these surroundings, right? This is an ability that we are then developing as we go along. So it's not that it was a flaw. It is simply that we are in the process of learning. You don't say a student is flawed just because the student is on the 3rd grade or the 4th grade or the 5th grade. The student is doing whatever that student has to do for the 3rd grade or for the 4th or the 5th and so on. You don't say flawed. You say learning, in the process of educating himself, herself. So it is with pride. So at this point, I need to make a little break and show you something about the model of the creation so that you can understand why I say it's an ability, why I say that this is something that we are developing in ourselves. For those of you who saw my lecture 2 years ago, you will remember these slides. I'm sorry. All right? But it's very important. And it's something that normally people have a tendency, even when they come to the Spiritist Center, they are told about this, they are educated about this, they have a tendency to brush aside because they think it's too technical. Oh, I don't need this. No, we need that. And you'll see in a minute why. This is why I have to go and rehash this, present this again to all of you. We have the Creator, and then we have the creation, right? I'm going to represent them by boxes, but don't read too much into it. Now, I cannot put the Creator inside of the creation box because then it would mean that the Creator is contained by the creation. I cannot put the creation inside of the Creator because I don't know if the Creator contains the creation. I really don't. So just for the sake of argument, I'm going to put them separate like this. And you notice that I had a little, like a sliver of white space between the two? Keep that in mind. Everything is important here. It's symbolic, all right? So, we divide, for didactical purposes, the creation into two sides. We divide the creation into two sides, not half and half. This is not cream, all right? So, we divide into the spiritual principle, the spiritual principle, and the universal cosmic fluid. The universal cosmic fluid will generate the material principle. The material principle, at its turn, will generate everything that has a materiality. and physicality. So it will generate matter, antimatter, dark matter, energy, dark energy, and we should not be that arrogant to say that we know everything about the universe. So the question mark there is to remind us that there are probably a million other things that we haven't even discovered yet, but they're all somewhat material. Material does not mean necessarily physical. That's what I draw the line. This is a physical body, which is also material. Our perispirits, our spiritual bodies, are material, but they're not physical. Okay? Then we have on this side the spiritual principle. The spiritual principle will generate the monad and the spirit. I'll explain to you in a moment what monad is. It's usually not something we read a lot about. And also the same way, I'm going to put here a question mark, a box for a question mark. And this box can represent many things, not just one item. What is important for us is to understand that this box here contains everything we still do not know. So let us simplify this, because this is not a physics class. We're not going to be talking about antimatter, dark energy. No. Let us just think about the simple things. Matter, we all know what it is, right? And the spirit monad. Now, the spirit monad, you notice that I put it in the same box? Because this is like when you start grammar school, high school. You may have whatever name your parents decided to give to you, but someone will be creative enough to bring you an alias, a nickname. Hopefully a good one that you'll be proud to say to other people, particularly to your grandparents, right? This is the same thing here. We start as a monad, and at a certain time in our evolution, we become a spirit. Is this a changing name? The idea is still the same. It is the spiritual principle that is us, that constitutes us. We are spirits, or monads at one point. We have a physical body. You see the difference. It's very important for us to understand these things. Now, matter can create two different types, inanimate matter, and another one that I will show you in a moment. So here, imagine, just for simplicity, that this matter here is making two boxes of inanimate matter, just for the time being. Then, the universal cosmic fluid can also create something else called a vital principle. When the vital principle combines with inanimate matter, look what happens. So when the vital principle combines with inanimate matter, all right, you are going to have what we call animated matter. See, when you put the two together, it becomes animated matter. So matter can create inanimate matter on its own. But for matter to create animated matter, you have to combine with vital fluid. Good? There you have it. So vital fluid combined with matter, giving animated matter. Animated matter is what the spirit or the monad is going to use to create our perispirit or spiritual body, they are synonyms, or the physical body. So then, this is going to be used to create the perispirit and the physical body. It will only create the perispirit and the physical body when the monad or spirit combines itself with the animated matter. Without the spirit, there is no perispirit, there is no physical body. This is very important for us to understand. Right? We only call physical body when we have the monad or spirit associated with animated matter. Now you notice that here I called perispirit. But if I am at the stage of a monad, I could call this perimonad. No problem. Instead of a physical body, I could call it the physical monad. All right? So don't get sidetracked by these things. I'm going to keep the nomenclature with spirit because we are more used to it, instead of used to monad. So, as I mentioned to you, when these two combine, that's when you get the perispirit, the physical body. So then, right now, all of us here, we are a triad, because we are spirits who actually have a perispirit and a physical body. So we are a triad, 3 in 1, right? Now, remember, look at the verbs. We are spirits, but we have perispirits and we have physical bodies. Of course, only one perispirit, one physical body, each one of us, right? When we die, in other words, when this physical body dies, because the spirit never dies. When this happens, all right, so we have this interaction here. So now when we die, what will happen is the physical body disappears. And we go from a triad to a dyad, 2. We are still spirits, but we have a perispirit. Right? And we can go on and on. Then we reincarnate, we get another physical body, we become a triad again. Then that physical body expires, goes away, we become a dyad once again in the spiritual world. We get another body, another physical body, another reincarnation process, another triad. And we can go on and on and on. And we have already had, I don't know how many, thousands, millions of those things. Who knows? Right? So this is the point here. But then, let us simplify now. So remember the spiritual principle, universal cosmic fluid producing vital and material principles. These two together produce animated matter that is used by the spirit to create the spirit, perispirit, physical body triad, right? As we reincarnate over and over and over again, and we become more and more morally and intellectually advanced, right? The physical body, the percentage next to the perispirit decreases. Our lifespan here increases. Our time in the spirituality between reincarnations also expands, right? Because now the spirit is becoming more and more important. We are becoming more and more morally evolved, or also intellectually evolved. And if you keep going, you will see that the representation of the physical body starts to decrease a lot. You notice there how small it's getting? One more, and oops, something happened there. We reached a point that we no longer need to reincarnate. No longer having a need to reincarnate, it means no longer physical bodies. Now we exist as spirits, as always. We are the spirit, we are spirits, right? But we have a little perispirit. But we continue to evolve. There is no end. We continue to evolve and evolve and evolve. And that perispirit becomes smaller and smaller and smaller to a point that here, you notice that I left just a little bit of the color of the animated matter, a little bit of the hue of the orange. We have a sliver of a perispirit. Very, very small, but we still have it. Most of us is now as a morally and intellectually advanced being, which we call perfected spirit. I prefer the word perfected, the past participle, as opposed to perfect, the adjective, because the perfected, being past participle, being a verb, tells me that I conquered that, as opposed to just being an attribute, an adjective, like good, bad. No, here it's saying that I perfected myself. But if you want to say perfect, it's fine, as long as you understand what has happened here. When we reach this point, right, we as the perfected spirit move and we bridge the gap between creator and creation, helping others like us, millions and millions of years ago, to one day reach that point. At this point here, we become what André Luiz calls in his book, Evolution in Two Worlds, co-creators in a minor scale. We are not creators, because otherwise it would be another God. And if we have two gods, it means that one has more than the other has. So it would be, again, imperfection. We are co-creators, minor scale, because we can do something things that God can do, but we cannot create perfection. We cannot create eternity. That is the job of the Creator. But that's where we go. So when Joana de Angelis tells us in her books, we are moving towards our plenitude. One day we will reach plenitude. This, and that. She is speaking the same language that Emmanuel tells us, that Emmanuel is speaking by saying that we are going to become perfected spirits. And then we are going to be moving ourselves to a different apartment, higher up in the hierarchy. All right? So why is this all important? Because we have a tendency when we come to the Spiritist Center to ask a question, and that's fine. I'm not rebuking anyone. Please do ask questions. But we have a tendency to think that we can solve all our problems by looking at this life or just looking at the immediate reincarnation before this one. And a lot of things started all the way back there when we were just what? Monads. Even before we got to the point of being a spirit. This is what we have to do to address guilt and pride. If we don't go back, all the way back, we are just going to be doing palliatives, putting like a Band-Aid, but we never really stop the hemorrhage. We're just putting Band-Aids on things. So this brings us to our next question, which is, where does pride come from? Because now I just told you this is our history. This is how we were put together. This is how we came to be what we are today, whatever we are, or whoever we are, and how perfect or imperfect we think we are. So where does this pride come from? Is there like a source for this pride? For instance, it was a water fountain that we drank when we was not supposed to. Is it the forbidden apple that we're not supposed to have taken a bite from? No, it's not. So this is why we had to go through that mechanism. Because when we look at our evolution, this line here, this arrow show our evolution. And we went through, don't worry about this, it's very light so that you don't get so sidetracked. My idea here is for us to focus on the animals, okay? It's just that someone might be able to see it, might ask a question later on, that's why it's there. But the idea here is for us to understand that we were not put together the way we are today. This is our major and most common mistake when we approach the Spiritist Center and we want to study. We want to solve everything as if we have always been this physical body, right? Even if I say, no, I know that in my past reincarnation, I had a different physical body. Or that between reincarnations, I had a perispirit that was this or that. No, we have to go even before that. As we started, and André Luiz says that beautifully in his books, many of them, he says we started as the atom. In the form of an atom, we were not spirits. That's why we say we were monads. Think of a monad as the spirit to be, like the freshman in spirituality. The monad is the freshman, is the person starting college or starting high school, right? And as the monad, we learn the laws of affinity in the atomic scale, at the molecular scale, the laws of reactivity. Then we start combining ourselves with others. And we began to create the very first molecules that will eventually allow us to perceive other molecules next to us. Chemical perception. Just to give you an idea, this here is still with us today in our noses. All that we have in terms of olfactory instinct or the olfactory sense comes from this stage here in our evolution. When we were cells, in unicellular organisms, we were not even an animal or like a big cat or a regular cat or a dog. And we continue. From here, we learn to process external signals, right? External stimuli from the environment. So I learned to move myself towards the light. I learned to move myself towards food. I learned to move myself towards water. And all of that continued, right, with pluricellular organisms, organisms that have more than one cell. More than one, many cells. And we kept going, and then eventually, as we reached the certain plants and the animal stage, we now could put all of this together into a form of a central processing unit, which we also call, in layman's terms, the brain. Right? This is when we can start putting together reflex arcs. We can have little brains and major brains, what we call the secondary or the peripheral nervous system, and the brain becoming the central nervous system. But until this point here, we are just processing information at a chemical, molecular level. We are not really thinking in the way that creating a scenario. By the time we get here, in the animal stage, we develop these brains, both the peripheral nervous system and the central nervous system, to such a state that we now have instinct. Instinct that remains with us. If a gun is fired outside, I doubt that you are all going to be sitting so politely over there. That's the instinct in all of you. You are going to be moving very quickly in every direction possible. Usually the direction is opposite to the gun. Right? So it's at this point here that we have instinct. And the instinct is then later going to give us the next stage, which is intelligence. So here we put a division, but it's again a didactical division. It doesn't exist as a line. This is not a Broca divide before and after. And so we have the one side, you have the Iron Age, the other side, you have the Bronze Age. This is just for us when we are studying, for us to understand what is going on. On the other side, we are humans. And here we talk about intelligence, reasoning, and free will. So something happens between these 2 points here. Now, unlike our birthdays, when we dread the day and then we get to the day and we're all festive about it, right? Here, it's not a birthday. It's not a point in time. It's a continuum. There is no real divide. You don't go to bed monad and wake up the next day spirit. You don't go to bed purely instinctive and and wake up next day intelligent, reasonable, and so on. There is a gradation. We can even see that there are certain animals that do have certain levels of intelligence. There are. You give for instance, a pot with a screwed-on lid to an octopus, it will open it. It will open it. And there are many other examples we could go on and on about it. But the only organism on this planet that is capable of creating scenarios from what he has already experienced, the only organism is us humans. It's we humans. Humans are the only ones that can learn a little bit, and then before they go through another round, they can say, well, what if I were to do this differently this time? No other animal can do that. A dog will get wet no matter how many times it rains, how often it rains. Every time it rains, the dog will get wet because the dog will never be able to create a scenario and envision the possibility that it can actually create a little dog house. We are the only ones who can do that. This is crucial to all of us because we are still with our behavior linked over here. When I said that we don't have a full ability to evaluate life, to evaluate our surroundings, to evaluate the set of circumstances in life, that we are learning it, it's because we are still in this passage from here to there. When we come to the Spiritist Center, we think that we are a cookie out of the oven, ready for consumption. that we have been baked the right amount of time, that we have been sprinkled with whatever sprinkles you're going to put on, that we are ready. It's not. We are still being, the dough is still being made. They're still kneading the dough. And this is where we are. We are in this passage here. We already call ourselves humans because we have this ability of creating scenarios, of creating expectations, of creating possibilities, likelihoods that animals do not have. However, it doesn't mean that we are already done, that we are perfect, that we have perfected that ability. It is here the cause of all our dilemmas, all our conundrums, all our difficulties. Because the moment that we realize that we ourselves are not yet there, that we are not already ready-made, we'll be able to do a better self-analysis, a more critical self-analysis, and stop our instinctive impulses that are now fully developed because we have already passed. This is a stage we have conquered, that we have mastered. This is the one we have not yet. So if we accept this difference now in behavior, that we are not fully grown, ready-made individuals, but that we are in the process of it, we can now look inside ourselves and measure our behavior a little bit better. In other words, do self-analysis, be more self-critical. And in doing so, prevent our instinctive behaviors from overcoming the intelligent ones, the reasonable ones. Most of the time, we don't act, we react. We're doing exactly what the cat does when you squeeze it a little differently and it goes and paws you, all right? Or when the dog bites you because the dog just simply got spooked by your brusque movement or something. That is us on a regular basis. When you are driving and you curse out of the window because someone just cut you off, that is the instinctive in all of us coming out. It is instinctive of us coming out. The passage spoke of love. The passage that was read about marriage, about not separating what God had put together, this and that. The second passage from Joanna de Angelis talked about free will and talked about willpower. We have now the free will to begin changing our abilities, to begin changing and developing those abilities through our intelligence and through our reasoning. We have to have the willpower to do so, or we will be stuck here at the instinctive level. All right? But one other thing that is very important for us to understand is that we don't have free will. Sorry to say this to you, sorry to break the news to all of you, nobody here has free will. We are developing free will. Free will is not something that you go to the supermarket shelf or to this beautiful bookshelves here and just pick it up and say, okay, that's how much it is. Okay, here's the money, and now I have free will before I didn't have. Nope. Free will is a constant upgrade of ourselves. We are developing it. Because imagine, if we were to receive free will, complete, right from the bat, out of the bat, right? God would have been imperfect. Because it's like giving a knife or a gun to a baby. Free will has to develop in accordance to our intelligence, in accordance to our reasoning. Another thing that we have to demystify, another habit, old and bad habit that we have to break. I have free will. No, you don't. Oh, I have my rights. No, you don't. Actually, most of the times it's a sense of self-entitlement. It's not even a right. Rights are also developed. The more responsible you are, the more reasonable you are, the clever you are, morally and intellectually speaking. This intelligence here is in a broader sense. It's not scientific intelligence or mathematical intelligence only. The more you have of these, the more free will you acquire for yourself, because it has to be at the proportion you can use it wisely. So when we put all these together, we get to the point of pride. At one point in our, and I'm just going as far back as the prehistoric man. As the prehistoric Julio, I saw this little thing, and that's what I was using to hunt. And then eventually, I created a spearhead. You notice that this one is polished. This one is not natural. Someone went there and polished it a little bit, made it a little better, right? It's sharper, right? So probably I can kill the animals more efficiently with this one than I could just with a piece of rock, with a pointy rock. The moment that I have this difference, I'm going to attribute to this one a different value than this one. Perhaps when I put this, when I try to give this to a prehistoric man, on the next cave, I'm going to say, well, I will need twice as much food that you gave me for this one here. Because now this one, besides trying to find something pointy to begin with, I had to polish. I had my work done. I am now using a material, a physical example to give you an idea. But imagine, for instance, that as I am evaluating how much I am going to apply to this, how much worth, how much value I'm going to give to this, imagine that instead of, I ask for it an absurd amount. Oh, you have to give me, I don't know, 10 saber-toothed cats. No, the skin of 10 saber-toothed cats, right? And nobody can do that. So this is what happens to our pride. We have something now, and we perceive its value with a certain approach. We perceive it according to what we understand of it. When we over-evaluate or we under-evaluate, we have problems. But particularly when we over-evaluate things. This is pride. This imbalance between the right value and the value we think it is. When Salieri was upset with Mozart's success, he never realized his own. He undervalued his and overvalued the others. And this created a chasm, not just a little gap, a chasm, a valley that he couldn't bridge anymore. And that led him to the frustration, the despondency, the irritation, everything. Even ire, even anger towards God. God, the Creator itself. The man he revered so much. The man he wanted to express, to whom he wanted to express all his love through his music. This is the problem we have. I call it the Spearhead Conundrum. Because think about our prehistoric ancestors. They had this, eventually they had that, and they had to assign a value. Those who actually were fair in their trades probably assigned the value and were able to trade. Those who were not perished because they couldn't sell. We perish with pride because we assign a value no one can give. When I think myself better than everybody else, I am assigning a value to myself nobody sees. So first, I don't have a correspondence. Other people are going to say, no, you're not worth all that. So then I get frustrated. And then if I'm selling something, if I'm selling my intelligence, if I'm selling my abilities at work, I won't be able to carry it out. Because nobody can afford that. Or even if they can afford it, they will say, no, this is not a fair price. You can think of it in terms of economics. This is pride for all of us. So the driving force of pride is exactly our immaturity. When I was talking about that diagram, from monad to spirit, from animals to humans, from pre-intelligence to intelligence, or from instinctive behavior to moderate intelligent behavior, this is what fuels pride. This is what is still giving us all these difficulties that we face in life. Because we interact. Life is a set of relationships. We interact. but we never give these interactions the right value. We overvalue ourselves and undervalue everybody else's, right? So, is it necessarily evil? It depends. Here is where people like to split hairs. They say, oh, but there is something to be said about satisfaction. Okay, let's go about that. Splitting hairs. Pride, satisfaction is the same thing. But when pride is just a little more, just a little bit of it, right, that we would call it satisfaction. Oh, I am satisfied with the job that I have. Oh, no, I did such a good job, or I baked this cake, or I did this, and I helped this person, and you feel that satisfaction. That is a form of pride. It is a rewarding mechanism. And we're going to see later on in guilt that we are actually beings that are still working like animals, trying to follow a rewarding mechanism. It's a psychological point. We do what rewards us positively, and we avoid the things that reward us negatively. Or let's say wouldn't reward, but that would cause us negative behavior or negative feedback. Right? So a little bit of it, yes, it is possible to do so. At our level of evolution, this satisfaction that we get is what allows us to feel happy, content with our actions, and go for the next step. Not for the perfected spirits. The perfected spirits have placed charity as a second nature to themselves. They do it not because they know it's charitable or because God might be. No, they just do it. It comes as second nature automatically to them. So there, they have no pride, not even a satisfaction. Oh, but they say that they are happy. Yes, again, split hairs. Happy, satisfied. Where do you draw the line? So this is what we're going to see here. Not worry about the words, but let's try to understand what is behind them, because our vocabulary is incomplete. So we're going to understand that a little bit of it, the little bit that allows me happiness to move on to the next step, that is positive. But anything that makes me worth so much more that others cannot afford, that stalls me. That's not good. And that has to be eradicated. Which is the next question. Should it be completely eliminated? Not necessarily. Right now, at this level of our evolvement, we cannot eradicate pride completely. We still need a soupçon of it, a tiny bit of it. It has to be there to propel us forward, to move us forward. But we have to be very careful where we draw the line. And we are the only ones, each and every one of us here, are the only ones who can judge that. The moment that it's stalling you, stalling your moral progress, stalling your intellectual progress, that's bad. You have to dial them, a little bit down, a little, at least a little bit, right? And finally, what is the impact? Well, we just discussed a little bit, and just to finish this part of the talk, I want to bring you something a little bit on the religious part from the gospel, so that we see that this has already been addressed. And this is from the passage, the Father revealed in the Son, from Matthew 11, 25 through 30. All right? And I would like to comment on this part here. At that time, Jesus said, I praise you, Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hidden these things from the wise and learned, and revealed them to the little children. Yes, Father, for this is what you were pleased to do. There's nothing about children there. There's nothing about adults versus children, adults versus teenagers. What there is those who were proud, and those who are humble. Because the moment that you tone yourself down a notch, that you allow yourself the possibility that there are things out there that you don't know, that's when you learn. You remove the anchors, the shackles that bind you, and you move forward. The ones that think that they know everything, they are shackling themselves, they are binding themselves, anchoring themselves very, very hard to the floor. They can't move at all. So it's not, God would never think of hiding anything. There's no point in doing that, because again, it would be against perfection. it would be against love. So what is meant here is that those who are who are proud, right? They become blind and they stall their progress. Those who are humble, they are always with eyes wide open. They are always expecting something new. They're always eager to learn. And this is what allows them to move forward. The children here is the idea, the symbolism for simplicity, for humility. All right? So this is what I had to talk to you about pride. The next topic, we'll have a break right now. The next topic is the psychology of guilt. And it's very hard to see it there because it's like a shadow.